Good afternoon and welcome to our session on information and assistance. My name is David Horvath. I'm a senior consultant with public partnerships, and I'm pleased to be joined today by my colleague, Andrew Thornton, who is an account manager in our client success division. We're delighted to be with you and really happy you joined us for this session. We're going to talk about information and assistance, which is one of two critical supports for self-direction. Along with financial management services, which we'll touch on briefly. And we're going to share some information about what is information and assistance, different ways that it can be provided, how it's currently provided in New Jersey. We'll talk about some details of the information and assistance or financial consulting that we provide in the Personal Preference Program, or PPP, and then get into questions and discussions with you, the audience. So we're delighted to have you join us on this journey. Before we go into some of the definitions about information and assistance, it's important to note that participants can elect whether or not to receive information and assistance and determine really how much support that they need within any program rules or limits that are established by the state when setting up the Medicaid program. So when we look at the definition of information and assistance, we look to the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, otherwise known as CMS. And as I mentioned, this is one of two critical supports for self-direction along with financial management. So what that means is whenever a state offers participants the opportunity to self-direct, they have to provide them with both of these supports: information and assistance, commonly called INA, sometimes called support brokerage, as well as financial management services, sometimes called fiscal intermediary services, fiscal employer agent, or some other names. CMS defines this really as helping participants or their representative with the responsibilities of self-direction. And so it includes helping them arrange, direct, and manage services. The support broker or information and assistance counselor serves really as an agent of the participant or the family and helps them identify short and long-term goals, develop options to meet those goals and address their needs, and access services and supports in their community. In addition, this might include practical skills training to help people, particularly with the responsibilities of being an employer, including recruiting and hiring their personal care workers, or what you might know as self-directed employees, managing their workers, and providing information on how to communicate and solve problems as they arrive in the self-directed journey. It's also important to note that it's really helping the participant or the representative do for themselves rather than doing things on behalf of the participant or the representative. So it's sort of the mantra you might hear is, if you teach a person to fish, you feed them for a lifetime. Whereas if you catch them a fish, you feed them dinner. So what are some other names for information and assistance? You might hear it referred to as supports brokerage. Many states call it counseling. You might be familiar with the term cash and counseling. And in fact, the New Jersey Personal Preference Program was one of the first three flagship cash and counseling models in the United States. And in that program, it's currently called financial counseling or financial consultant services. And then in some other states, it's called resource consulting. These are all similar names or different names for a similar service. So, regardless of what it's called, it's basically providing information and providing assistance, again, to help people with the responsibilities of self-direction. So what types of information are provided? So if we look at the CMS definition for this service, basically, it includes person-centered planning and how that's applied. Sometimes that's also shared with a service coordinator. The range and scope of individual choices and options. So in other words, understanding what services are available, what are the unit limits, dollar limits, visit limits, rates for different services, things like that. How do you change your plan of care or plan of service and your individual budget, including, for example, like an appeals process, or if you want to move your money around in programs that offer budget authority, then INA would also, help you with that. The complaints and grievance process, problems do arise in self-direction as they do in traditional agency services. And so it's important for participants and representatives to be able to avail themselves of the complaint and grievance process and have their needs addressed. The risks and responsibilities of self-direction, particularly when you choose to become an employer, what are some of the risks associated with that? Do you have workers' comp insurance available? Things of that nature. What are your responsibilities, to be an equal opportunity employer, things of that nature. Freedom of choice of providers. So it's really important to have a knowledge of community resources and different vendors and providers of services, as well as purchasing options for those things, particularly in programs that would include budget authority and the ability to purchase what are called participant-directed or individual-directed goods and services. Certainly individual rights under the program, reassessment and review schedules, and basically anything else specific to the program or to self-direction in general that's going to help the individual and family navigate and manage and direct their services and supports. In terms of some of the assistance that is provided, again, it can include defining goals, needs, and preferences, including determining who you might want to hire, how you might want to schedule them, throughout the week or throughout the year. For instance, your summer schedule might be different because of school schedules, summer camp schedules, things of that nature. And so it's important to think about your budget structure and how it operates, whether it's monthly, whether it's annual, and whether you're going to vary it from week to week, month to month, those kind of things. Certainly one of the biggest roles in providing assistance is helping with training the participant or the representative in things like hiring, managing, terminating workers, including how to fire a family member if you no longer want them to work for you or provide your services. And again, how to solve problems and resolve conflict. In the early days, a lot of programs used what were called risk management agreements, particularly if the program rules allowed you to hire someone who failed a criminal background check, but was known to you and otherwise trusted by you. Some states would adopt what they called negotiated risk agreements. And so if that's a component of the program, that's something that the counselor can help you with. Developing an emergency backup plan. Every service plan or plan of care needs to include some emergency backup provisions, not only what happens in the event of like a community emergency, but what happens if your worker doesn't show up. Will you receive agency services as a backup? Will you have a secondary worker? Will they be already credentialed and ready to go? Those kind of things. Recognizing and reporting critical events or what many states call incident management. So reporting allegations of fraud, waste, abuse, neglect, things of that nature. Independent advocacy, which is sometimes separate from support brokerage and sometimes it's combined with support brokerage and INA. But some programs offer independent advocacy. Some states also call it independent facilitation. That's available in some programs as well. And then any other areas related to managing your services and supports. And it really varies based on the array of services and whether or not you have employer authority and budget authority. And that's really a good segue into this slide, is that the supports really depend on the extent of the decision-making or choice and control that participants have available to them in the self-directed program. So for example, if the waiver or Medicaid state plan program provided only for employer authority, then the types of support and the knowledge of community resources would be less than if the participant also had budget authority and could purchase a wide variety of goods and services, for example, in the New Jersey DDD programs. as well as in the PPP program. And I should mention in PPP, that's one of the only programs that we serve that actually does include a cash option where participants can take a portion of their budget as cash under that budget authority. Now, you might ask, well, what's the relationship between information and assistance or support brokerage and case management or service coordination? Well, they are related and they can overlap. But they can't duplicate the exact same services and supports. So the support broker might assist during development of the person-centered plan to help make sure that the participants' needs and preferences are understood, but the case manager or service coordinator would be responsible for the overall development of that plan with the individual and family. So there can be some overlap there, but not exact duplication. And we'll talk a little bit more about this as we look at different models of information and assistance and service coordination or case management. And again, as I mentioned, it's not the same as independent advocacy, but many states choose to offer independent advocacy separately, and they might even call it support brokerage. So you kind of have to understand the specific terms that your state might use. So let's talk about the different ways in Medicaid programs that you can actually, that states can actually make information and assistance available. And there are three basic ways. The first one is as a component of case management activity, where the case manager or service coordinator, and most frequently that's as a Medicaid service, where they actually provide the information and assistance. And sometimes when states transition to managed care, that can even fall on the shoulders of the MCO or accountable care organization care coordinator. The other way you can define it is as a waiver service, where it's a standalone, distinct Medicaid waiver service, or even in a state plan. And then lastly, you can define it as a contracted administrative activity, where the state contracts with a vendor such as PPL to provide information and assistance. And we'll look at some variations on each of these basic ways of providing INA. So in New Jersey, in the PPP program, INA or information and assistance is an administrative activity that is procured by the state in collaboration with the managed care organizations. And it's combined with the financial management services that PPL performs under contract with New Jersey DMAS. And the particular financial management model there is it's called fiscal employer agent, where PPL serves as a fiscal agent and as an employer agent on behalf of participants. And those participants have what's called common law employer authority. So they get to hire their own workers, including friends and family, and PPL does their payroll. We offer the EVV solution, and we also provide the information and assistance. So we help them understand the program rules, and Andrew will talk through in a lot more detail about our specific role there. But those services are combined in PPP. It's important to note that when PPP was first launched back in the early 2000s, information and assistance was actually provided separately from the financial management services. However, participants had some difficulty, knowing who to contact and get their questions answered, and so New Jersey elected to combine information and assistance with FMS or financial management services for a more seamless overall participant experience. And they've been so pleased with that result, and it's been very successful. The program has grown by leaps and bounds under this model, and several other states, including Arkansas, one of the first cash and counseling states, my home state of West Virginia, and a few other states, Tennessee, for example, have also adopted this model and been quite pleased with it. Now, as we mentioned, there's another way to provide INA, and that is as a component of service coordination or case management. And in the DD waiver program in New Jersey. That's how this information and assistance is provided. It falls on the shoulders of the case manager or service coordinator or support coordinator, and it's in addition to their other duties. So not only will they help with the development of the individual service plan, but they'll also help you with the responsibilities of being an employer. And there's a little bit of overlap there with the financial management services, whether it's provided by PPL or provided by Easter Seals, depending on the employment model that's chosen. We all try to work together to make sure that all the questions are answered and that people have the right kind of supports that they need to be successful in both of these models. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Andrew, and Andrew's going to talk us through the financial consultant's roles and responsibilities. Andrew?
Great. Thank you, David. For the next few slides, we're going to focus on what the financial consultant does and not necessarily how they do it. We want to keep this a little more geared towards what you can expect and a little less operational. What I will tell you, based on this chart right here, is the first two steps on your self-directed journey in the New Jersey PPP program specifically will be a very high-touch, a very concierge experience with our INA staff. So first things first, you get referred to the personal preference program after your managed care organization deems you eligible. And then our orientation and training team will reach out, perform a welcome call, and then assist you as the participant and your employees with the initial enrollment. From there, you'll go through a couple different training calls to orient you to the program guidelines, ensure they understand, everyone understands their roles, whether you're the employer. As David mentioned earlier, you're responsible for hiring, interviewing, firing, scheduling, ensuring service delivery, approving timesheets once the providers submit them, et cetera. So really we try to set you up for success initially, but we don't just let you off the hook after that. After the initial onboarding, the INA staff refers issues to MCOs if there's enrollment questions, and really acts as a liaison between you and your managed care plan. After your initial training is completed, you will be assigned a financial consultant, and they are your financial consultant. They are your one-stop shop for pretty much any programmatic question that you may have. And if they don't have the answer, they will either find it out for you, or they will direct you to the appropriate party. We try to keep everything in-house and really make that INA, that financial consultant, your personal resource. So your financial consultant will meet with you to identify your personal care needs. Public Partnerships has recently created a person-centered planning tool. And we'll get into that more in the following slides, but really making sure that the participant is the center of this whole program, the center of your budget. We identify your goals, your wants, your desires, and we try to help you craft a budget that will successfully allow you to meet those goals. As David mentioned earlier, in certain circumstances, there might be allowances for a larger goods purchases, such as a microwave, or in other rare circumstances, maybe a cash disbursement to pay for things that aren't currently covered under your insurance. The last major hurdle in getting access to the program and getting you into a steady state of program operation is your financial consultant will assist you in developing a monthly budget. We call it a cash management plan in New Jersey. You might see budget, CMP, cash management plan. They're all the same thing. It's your monthly allocation for services, and they'll sit down with you and try to figure out how best to use your allocation to meet your goals. Now, after you are enrolled in the program and you have your first date of service, your financial consultant will maintain monthly telephone contacts with you over the first 6 months. So you will get at least one call from your consultant for the first 6 months. And that's just to make sure that there are no outstanding questions, nothing that wasn't covered, nothing that has come up that that maybe you didn't think of during the initial orientation. We can completely recognize that a lot of times you're learning a lot of new things, and it's like drinking through a fire hose sometimes. So we want to continue that touch base and just reassure you that we're here to help and make ourselves available to you on a very regular basis, especially during the first 6 months. Now, that's not saying that you can't call your consultant whenever you have an issue. That's literally what they're there for. So if you have the need for 4 calls during the first month because you have 4 questions, then please, by all means, call us 4 times. Call your consultant 4 times. Call them as much as you need. The last piece is ongoing education. So after the first 6 months, program rules require a quarterly touch base with your financial consultant. So they will reach out, and once a quarter, once every 3 months, they will be scheduling a touch base for you. At that point, they're going to go through any program changes that might have happened. Recently, there was the addition of sick time in the New Jersey markets. So that was a major program change that our financial consultants brought to the quarterly visits and brought to the population to explain how it works, how you access it, the guidelines surrounding that. More recently, as some of you may have seen and some of you will see through the rest of this calendar year, electronic visit verification is rolling out, and we're doing that by a plan basis. So eventually everyone should see it or hear about it. Some of you have, some of you haven't, as I said, but that's another big programmatic change that our financial consultants assist with, just to make sure that you're comfortable with that functionality, comfortable with what is expected as both an employer and a provider, and maybe an authorized rep. And just make sure that you feel like you are successful in the program, given those recent and upcoming changes. All right, your financial consultant, how do they support your self-directed journey? So again, I went through some of this on the last slide. We have a dedicated training and orientation team that will make initial outreach. These folks are solely focused on making sure that you have all the tools, resources, documentation that we've created for the program, and to make sure that you can take that and learn in the best method to you. Some people are auditory learners, some people are visual learners. So we're going to try to provide both different methods of orienting you to the program. Again, the program roles, what's expected to you. They will be your first stop, but not your last stop on your self-directed journey once your referral reaches PPL from your managed care organization. Again, after that training and orientation, you'll be assigned your very own financial consultant. While it's not always possible, we try to match you with someone who speaks your primary language if they're available. And we try to match you with someone who's in your geographical location, again, if available. Prior to COVID, quarterly visits and the initial orientation and training would be handled in person. Obviously, our lives have changed since then. And so right now we're still doing remote visits. But again, who knows what the future will hold. At some point, I'm hoping we can go back to in-person visits. Maybe there'll be a hybrid approach. But again, your financial consultant, we try to make it the best fit for you based on language and location. I don't want to rehash too much of what I said on the last slide. But again, this is a pretty comprehensive list of everything that you can expect from your consultant. Again, they are your resource. This is part of the program. There's someone that you can go to when you have programmatic questions. You can see that the next to last bullet there is ad hoc support as needed. So if you need it, please, please, please feel free to use that resource. All right, I want to touch on a little bit more on the person-centered planning tool. So while person-centeredness is very much a core of PPL's philosophy, not every program incorporates as robust of a person-centered planning tool as we do in the PPP side. So our PPP supports plan tool encourages the engagement from the participants, from your employees, from your care network, from the people in your life that you want to include. And again, the big thing with this is that the participant is driving these conversations. We can help facilitate, and we do help facilitate as the form prescribes. but it provides an outline for how best to use the current MCO budget, and we'll get more into that on the next slide with the cash management plan. But overarchingly, it focuses on participant needs, goals, and desires as the participant defines them. So, for example, I want to be able to cook more meals by myself. We're going to craft a person-centered plan designed around getting you to the point where you can cook more meals for yourself. Your role as the employer. I lied on the last slide, sorry. Cash management plan is next, I promise it's coming. But this is a big piece of INA as well. Many self-directed participants don't have experience acting as a sole employer. Again, the hiring, the firing, the scheduling. How do you fire one of your relatives or your neighbors or someone who lives in the same house as you? I'm not self-directed, and I still don't have experience being an employer. So we really take that seriously, and we've designed a series of tips and documentation on how to interview. So here's some interview tips. Here's how to hire. Here's how you can identify a good candidate fit for you. Again, the difficult conversations, the conflict resolution, scheduling, having backup workers to divert any potential care crisis. Everything you need to be a successful employer in the program, we try to give you upfront. And again, we can't interview the employees for you, but we can give you tips and help you feel confident that you can be successful in this role. All right, now we're on the cash management plan. So for the cash management plan, again, this is not the very last thing you have to do before you can start receiving services if you're a participant, or providing services if you're a PCA. But this is the last major hurdle and the last big lift that you would have to do. And your financial consultant makes it as easy as possible. We have a cash management plan template, and they will walk you through all the different elements of a self-directed budget. So we'll take that person-centered plan with those identified needs, and we'll take the cash allocation, the budget allocation rather, and we'll turn that into a plan on how to reach your goals. So you need to create the cash management plan with your financial consultant, and if you need an authorized representative, they can assist as well. The employee, because they are your employee, even if they are part of your natural supports, it's not really appropriate for them to sit in on the budget discussion. This is more of an employer role or an authorized rep, and the authorized rep is someone who assists with employer responsibilities. So the consultant will assist the participant with how many the hours their employees can work, need to work, and in the PPP program, there is flexibility within the pay rates. So if you have a worker who is supremely effective in certain tasks, whether it's activities of daily living or something else, you could elect to pay them a higher wage. The way the budget allocation works, though, it's a set amount per month. And so if you do pay them a higher wage, you're going to get less hours. And so those are the kind of conversations and the kind of math that the consultant will be able to show you based on your needs, desires, and end goals. And just a last point on the cash management plan, again, we've hit on it a couple times. In certain circumstances, certain goods and or a cash disbursement monthly is appropriate. Those are a little more rare in the personal preference program, but it doesn't mean that they're not available. The financial consultant will help you identify if those are appropriate and work with the state to get permission to add those into the cash management plan, should it be approved by Medicaid and DMAS.
Great, thank you, Andrew. And just a couple comments. It's often said that if you see one self-directed program, you've seen one self-directed program. And if you're currently in one of the New Jersey DDD programs, you may recognize that, oh, there's some differences here. For instance, the PPP program allows the participant to take, I believe it's 10 to 15% of their budget as cash for things for which receipts are not typically available. Things like bus tickets, going to a laundromat, things of that nature. and that's not available on the DD side, to my knowledge. So a lot of differences. And here we focus primarily on PPP because that's the program where we provide the financial counseling, the information and assistance. If you have questions about the information and assistance role in the DDD side, then those questions are best directed to your service coordinator. With that, I think we're going to open it up for questions, and I'll turn it over to the session moderator. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll turn it over to your presenters. If they would like to open for questions, happy to do that. However you would like to proceed.
Hey, yeah, thanks. And not just questions, but we'd love to hear your personal experiences and engage in any discussion, and certainly elaborate on anything that we might have discussed.
So I do see a question in the chat from Sam about the cash disbursement. So I do want to first say that in a 25,000 person program, there are less than 500 people who qualify for this. These are incidental expenses that are not covered by insurance, and every request for cash allocation in the budget has to be approved by DMAS. While it is possible, there are very specific scenarios where the state deems it appropriate to build in that cash disbursement. We'll go back and we'll get a little more information on that, because I know that it sounds really good and it's something that can be very useful as part of the budget. But the approval process is fairly strict based on whether you're under the MLTSS umbrella or not. There are two different sets of criteria, closely aligned, but definitely different based on where you fall on that spectrum. So we will get more information about that, and we'll post it along with these slides. Thank you, Sam.
And thanks for that response, Andrew. It's also important to note that any money that an eligible participant chooses to take as cash would have to come out of their budget and come from somewhere else. So you'd have to reduce hours or change wage rates or something of that nature, correct?
Correct.
Other thoughts? And I believe we may have at least one of the PPL financial consultants might be in the audience. So if you have any questions specifically for them, happy to have them weigh in as well with their personal experience. I'm curious if we have any care coordinators, care managers from health plans on the call, and if you've got any experiences with our financial consulting services in the PPP program. I'd love to hear your experiences.
We're a quiet group today.
Let's see what we says. Some support coordinators do not even know PPL exists. Frustrating to get information and assistance. Understood. Love to hear some ideas about how we can do that better. We do regular chats and webinars for the care coordinators on the health plan side. Andrew, anything else on that?
Yep, and so we've recently met, and this has been longstanding, but the most recent cadence of self-direction orientation for the managed care plans has kicked off this spring. We try to hold them quarterly, or at least we offer quarterly to orient new case managers, service coordinators to self-direction and try to help upstream from PPL and the PPP program to make sure everyone has the tools and access to that information to be able to make a very informed choice on which model of service delivery is for you. I love using this example. If I have a child and they need 24/7 care, and I have a dozen or a baker's dozen workers that I have to schedule and track it all in the spreadsheet, I don't want to do that. And self-direction might not be a good fit for me. But if I have a very manageable workforce, I really know what my child needs. I can help train them on, this is how he likes getting out of bed. This is how she likes getting dressed in the morning. And it's a more manageable scope. Then self-direction is more than likely a really good fit for me. But as much as it's empowering, you also are responsible as the employer or the authorized rep for ensuring that service delivery. And I can see Jessica followed that up too with more interested in learning about the training and orientation for families. So I'd like to say it's comprehensive from a programmatic guidelines and orienting you to that. It is very comprehensive, but we also try to tailor it towards your individual needs. So depending what your household situation is, like there could be a lot of siblings run around that will complicate service delivery if they try to get involved, you younger kids, or you could have just a very full house, or there could be environmental modifications that you've made to your home, and we try to tailor that to your specific situation. But ultimately, it's going to come down to the employer and the authorized rep dictating how those services are delivered. So we'll give you the framework. We'll try to plug your situation into that framework and then allow you to ask specific questions. That's one of the reasons we have monthly follow-up calls for the first 6 months, because you're still feeling it out. A lot of times this is people's first foray into a self-directed program. And if it's not great, but if it is, there are things that I said in the presentation, there are things that will come up that you just didn't think to ask because, like, hey, my situation is different. How do I do this? And that's why we're really hands-on for the first 6 months until you really get your feet under you.
So I'd like to add to that, Andrew. We are increasingly seeing states add self-direction training to their services. And so whether they have support coordination, information assistance, support brokerage, whatever, we're seeing states identify this as a gap that can be filled. And just to give you one example, in Connecticut, for their developmental disabilities waiver programs, we provide that training. We were selected, and we provide online competency-based training for individuals and families to log in and learn how to be a good employer, learn the program rules, things of that nature. And then we have trainers that are available to assist. And then they basically also have access to a peer support network of other individuals and families who are acting as employers in the program already, and that's proven to be very successful. And now we're seeing other states express interest in that as well. In fact, the state of Vermont just issued a request for proposals to add self-direction training to their program. And I think that's a good segue into the next question, Andrew. What would we say about INA and fears of fraud, waste, and abuse? PPL does provide training on fraud, waste, and abuse, and for all of our staff. Also, false claims reporting. There's a myth about. We think it's a myth about fraud, waste, and abuse being more prevalent in self-directed programs. What we have found to be the case is that instances of improper payments tend to be related to people not understanding the program rules, right? And so there's a direct relationship between INA and instances of fraud, waste, or abuse. And so that goes hand in hand with financial management services and having pay controls that are built in with the unit limits, dollar limits, provider credentialing requirements, and all of that. It sort of goes hand in hand. And that's another example of why it's good for INA and FMS to be bundled together, or at least well coordinated. This next one is about 6 months call, and how did New Jersey determine if that was the right frequency, and any sort of safety net until face-to-face supports can take over. We can't speak for New Jersey and why 6 months was deemed to be the the right interval. But Andrew, any thoughts or comments on that?
Yep. So the 6 month the 6 month lead time into the program was something that we added in, and we found it's pretty much the sweet spot. You might not need the touch base in month 4, rather month 5, month 6, but we'd rather have that prescribed contact just to make sure that you're set up for success in this program. At a minimum, right, when you get into what we'd call steady state after that 6 month runway, you would get 2 calls in 6 months. And so this really isn't too much more than that. You're getting an extra 4 calls. If you don't have any questions, and great, thank you for the call. Have a great day, and we'll see you later. Amber, do you want to jump in on any of that, and then maybe talk a little bit about our hybrid technology and what we're doing in INA through COVID?
Sure thing. So the 6 month calls are basically just a touch base, just to check in and prevent any issues before they happen. So those callers that are calling every 6 months are taking a look completely at the account. They're checking over the timesheets. They're looking for any common patterns or trends with mistakes or errors where the participant or a authorized representative can be coached. After that 6 months is up, the participant or authorized representative can choose to continue to receive monthly calls if they feel like they still need them. And then those monthly calls will continue on in addition to the quarterly visit calls that are happening. So we find that those 6 month, the first 6 months have been very helpful in the beginning of the program, as people kind of learn their way and find their groove with the program and what's working for them and what's not.
Great, thanks, Amber.
You're welcome.
David, I think the next one is for you. Is there a current RFP out right now for states to write in this comprehensive training for families? And I assume this is either the other self-directed side of New Jersey and or on a national level.
So every state decides for themselves within Medicaid rules how to provide information and assistance, and that includes self-direction training. So it's really a state call for each program, for the state to decide what are the training needs and how can they best be met, right? And we just talked about some of the training that PPL provides through the managed care organizations, the health plans. For the PPP program, it's built right into our model. It's part of the upfront orientation and training that PPL does as part of that information and assistance. So it's sort of front loaded, but then it's also ongoing. So there's not any sort of national RFP. This is handled on a state by state and program by program basis. But we're seeing it as a trend, and we think it may continue. Where does the support coordinator fit in? Andrew, you want to talk a little bit about that?
I can take that. Yep. So, excuse me, your support coordinator is still they're still in your support network. The managed care organizations and therefore your case manager, your care manager, support coordinator, they will still do your assessments. They act as an extension of our INA in certain respects. So let's say the participant gets admitted to the hospital for a couple days. They will let us know. One of the program guidelines is you can't bill for self-directed services while you're in the hospital. So we do have that feedback loop. They are responsible for quality outcomes and making sure that services are being delivered. Our INA helps with that a lot. So if on one of our monthly calls or one of our quarterly calls, you mention something like, yeah, my worker's not showing up on Wednesdays. I'm having trouble getting out of bed in the morning, getting dressed in the morning. We will raise that to the managed care organization, and we'll also work with you in tandem to say, okay, let's see if we can find a backup worker for Wednesdays, because obviously something's going on. Have you had that conversation with your provider that, you know, you're telling them that this is absolutely necessary? I need your help in the morning. I need to get ready for my day. That sort of feedback loop is a daily occurrence. We actually a dedicated set of staff who are liaisons to the MCO that work with your financial consultant, so that any problems that you bring up with the service delivery, if you have a change in condition and you feel like you need to get reassessed, we'll bring that to the managed care organization as well. It doesn't mean you can't go to your service coordinator directly. There is a no wrong door policy between our two organizations. It doesn't matter which plan you have. But yeah, they help INA from the Medicaid eligibility standpoint and from the care delivery continuity standpoint, just to make sure that everything is set and in place, and that you are being successful in this program.
And I think, Andrew, you hit on an important thing, and that is that INA staff typically have no involvement in individual budgeting, actually determining the amount of the individual budget. That's based on assessed need. Once that budget is determined, we are all about helping you figure out how to spend it, how to manage it, how to plan for it, whether you have wage authority and you're adjusting wages, whether you're setting aside money for a future purchase, any of that thing, that's all on INA. But the support coordinator, care manager, care coordinator in an MCO world really has that responsibility. Amber, would you add anything to what Andrew and I have said about support coordination?
No, I think you guys pretty much summed it up. We do work directly with the liaisons to report instances where maybe someone is having a significant change and they're requesting more hours. And to kind of piggyback off of one of the questions above in the chat about how we implement best practices with having the participants or the authorized representatives become good employers, that kind of goes hand in hand with that, because those are things that we want to make sure are communicated with us so we can support the participants as well, and making sure that instances like that, like hospitalizations or changes with care needs, happen. We also teach them how to use our systems and how to maintain their autonomy in self-direction, and understanding that they have flexibility with their budgets. And we educate them on the rules and regulations of the program, and also the options that they have based on their individual needs. So that kind of goes along with managing their budgets and being a good employer. Those are things that we check in with them on our quarterly visits every time. We also have the conversation with them regarding their employees and how their employees are performing and how they're offering feedback. So it's an ongoing conversation that's very comfortable, because it's a conversation that we're having with them each quarter. So it kind of opens up that door for them to feel comfortable to ask questions, maybe if they're not comfortable speaking with their employee about maybe the way they assist them with transfers or something like that. So we support in that area as well.
Great, thank you. And I'll go back up. There was a question about training. I forgot to mention that we do have a couple of general orientation and training videos right on our website. So if you go to the PPL website, you will see a couple of short videos on how to be an employer. They're not customized to New Jersey PPP or New Jersey DDD programs. They're just sort of generic, high level. But it's useful information and gives you some things to think about.
Great. Any other questions? Great questions.
Looks like, say you have an employee that has gone through the whole onboarding process and they start working for you. Then they need to take a temporary break for 2 to 3 months. Is it true you still have to pay a check fee for them each pay period even though they're not working any hours. Am I understanding that correctly? It's confusing. So Andrew, I'm going to try to address this from a high level and then ask you to, and Amber, to fill in the gaps. The check processing fee, well, actually, let me just turn it over to you guys, because I think it may be more specific than I'm able to answer.
So I'm going to be very general, and then I'm going to turn it over to Amber, who has experience with creating the CMPs and with the check fee. In general, we try to forecast for the entire CMP period, which is usually a year or more, sometimes less, sometimes more, but generally at least a year. We try to forecast based on how many workers you have on your roll and how many pay periods are in the month. So we do our best to get as close to that as possible. Now, some months your workers might have more payrolls, more checks dispersed to them than what is in your CMP. In those instances, we don't charge an extra. And in that example right there, the CMP for the check fee is still allocated, but it's difficult to get it exactly, just based on the fact that we don't have visibility into when your worker is working and when they're taking a hiatus every time. Amber, do you have anything else to add on that, the whole creation and the calculation that goes into it?
No, you're absolutely right. So ideally, we have the funds allocated for each month leading up to the renewal policy of the workers' compensation. So it does typically look like 1 year. So we've allocated those funds for the check fees, the employee allocations ahead of time. And like you said, there's really no way to kind of predict if the employee is going to be working or not. So if your employee goes for a couple of months without working, then the funds would remain in the budget. Like you said, it's kind of hard to say because it is kind of like on a, we wouldn't know unless you reported it, but you do need to have an active employee. So in that case, we would maybe look into locating another employee, a backup employee. That's kind of where that having a backup employee and a backup emergency backup plan in place comes in as well.
Got it. And so I think it's important to remember that a cash management plan is just that. It's a plan, and it's our best estimate working with you as to who you're going to hire, when they're going to be working for you, and what fees should apply. But as with any plan, it can be revised, right? So you can contact your financial consultant and revise your cash management plan as your circumstances and needs change.
Great.
Well, I see we're just about at time. So I'll ask the moderator or Donna if there's anything else you want to say to close us out. But I would like to thank Amber and Andrew for your wonderful contributions to today's session. I learned a lot, so it's very nice.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Anything else? All right, I see we are at time.
Thank
All right,
you,
thank you,
PPL.
everyone.
That was fantastic. Again, the presentation will be, the slides will be posted on the conference website in addition to the pre-recording. So go there, and we also look for the additional sessions coming up on the 22nd and our closing. And this evening we have another session on navigating community mapping and sustaining self-direction. Thank you for your participation. Thank you, PPL, for all of your work, and we will see you soon.
Thank you.